At its greatest extent, one empire ruled more land than any civilization before it. From the frozen forests of Siberia to the fertile plains of Hungary, from the Pacific Ocean to the gates of the Middle East, its horsemen crossed continents with astonishing speed. Kingdoms surrendered before battles even began. Entire dynasties collapsed within months. Cities that had stood for centuries suddenly became part of something far larger. To millions of people, the Mongols seemed unstoppable. They were feared across Europe, respected throughout Asia, and remembered as warriors unlike anything the world had ever seen. Yet only a few generations later, the largest contiguous empire in human history had begun to disappear. No overwhelming invasion destroyed it. No single battle erased it. No rival empire conquered it. Instead, its greatest enemy emerged from within. How could an empire that conquered nearly the entire known world fail to survive itself? The answer begins long before the empire existed. It begins on the endless grasslands of Mongolia, a land unlike any other. There were no great cities, no marble palaces, no stone castles, only vast open steppes stretching endlessly beneath enormous skies. Life here was harsh. Winters were brutal. Food was uncertain. Survival demanded strength, endurance, and absolute resilience. The tribes who lived here fought constantly. Alliances formed and disappeared just as quickly. Loyalty changed with opportunity. Power belonged only to those capable of defending it. Among these tribes, a young boy named Temujin entered a world already filled with violence. His father was poisoned by rivals. His family was abandoned. As a child, he experienced hunger, betrayal, and exile. Many believed his story would end there. Instead, those hardships became his greatest teacher. Temujin understood something most leaders never did. Strength alone could never unite the steppe. Trust had to be earned. Loyalty had to be rewarded. Ability mattered more than noble birth. For the first time, talented warriors could rise regardless of their family. That decision changed history. One tribe after another joined him, some willingly, others after defeat. Gradually, the endless conflicts that had divided Mongolia for generations came to an end. In 1206, the tribal leaders gathered together. They proclaimed Temujin as Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. But becoming Khan was only the beginning. His ambitions reached far beyond the Mongolian plains. Most neighboring kingdoms believed these nomadic horsemen posed little danger. They underestimated them completely. The Mongol army looked simple. There were no enormous supply trains, no heavy armored formations, no massive siege equipment traveling behind every campaign. Instead, they relied on speed, discipline, communication, and extraordinary planning. Every warrior carried multiple horses. When one animal became tired, another immediately replaced it. This allowed Mongol armies to travel astonishing distances without slowing down. Messages moved through an organized relay system stretching across thousands of miles. Orders reached commanders with remarkable efficiency. Information became one of their greatest weapons. Before invading any kingdom, they gathered intelligence. They studied roads, rivers, mountains, political rivalries, weaknesses. Often, they knew more about their enemies than the enemies knew about themselves. Then came the attack. Fast, coordinated, unexpected. Entire armies found themselves surrounded before realizing the battle had begun. Cities expecting lengthy sieges suddenly faced overwhelming pressure from multiple directions. Fear spread even faster than the Mongol cavalry. Stories of previous conquests convinced many rulers to surrender immediately. Psychology became another battlefield. Victory often arrived before combat. Northern China fell, then Central Asia. The Khwarezmian Empire collapsed with astonishing speed. Persian cities surrendered. Russian principalities fractured. The Mongol advance continued westward into Europe. Nothing seemed capable of stopping them. By the middle of the 13th century, the Mongol Empire stretched farther than anyone had imagined possible. No ruler in history had ever controlled so much land. No empire connected so many cultures. No military had conquered territory so quickly. To many observers, it appeared the Mongols would eventually dominate the entire known world. But hidden beneath those incredible victories, a much quieter problem had already begun to grow, one that no army could ever defeat. The Mongol Empire looked invincible, but the larger it became, the harder it was to govern. Messages that once crossed Mongolia in days now required weeks, sometimes months. Governors ruled lands separated by deserts, mountains, and thousands of miles of open steppe. Each conquered region had its own language, its own religion, its own traditions. Keeping them united demanded more than military victories. It demanded constant leadership. And that became increasingly difficult. Even Genghis Khan understood that no empire could depend on one man forever. Before his death in 1227, he divided responsibilities among his sons. It seemed practical. At the time, few questioned the decision. After all, the Mongol armies continued expanding. New territories continued falling. The empire still appeared stronger than ever. But beneath that appearance, something had changed forever. Leadership was no longer absolute. Every new great Khan had to be chosen. That process required the most powerful princes and generals to return home for a Kurultai, the great assembly where a new ruler would be elected. Every succession interrupted military campaigns. Every election created uncertainty. Every generation introduced new rivalries. The system that had once united ambitious warriors slowly became a source of division. After Genghis Khan came Ögedei, an effective ruler who continued expanding the empire. Under his leadership, the Mongols advanced deeper into Europe. Entire kingdoms trembled before them. Then, Ögedei died. Almost immediately, the Western campaigns stopped. Not because the Mongols had been defeated, but because their commanders had to return east to decide who would rule next. Europe had survived, not through superior strength, but because politics demanded the empire's attention elsewhere. It was a turning point. The conquests never recovered the same unstoppable momentum. As decades passed, the empire grew even larger, yet unity grew weaker. Eventually, the vast empire became four major khanates. The Yuan dynasty ruled China. The Golden Horde dominated the northern steppes and much of Eastern Europe. The Chagatai Khanate controlled Central Asia. The Ilkhanate governed Persia and the Middle East. Officially, they all belonged to the same empire. In reality, each began pursuing its own interests. Trade policies differed. Military priorities changed. Political rivalries intensified. The descendants of Genghis Khan increasingly competed with one another instead of working together. The empire had not been conquered. It had begun separating from within. At the same time, the conquered civilizations were changing the conquerors themselves. Many Mongol rulers adopted local customs. Some embraced Buddhism. Others converted to Islam. Others governed according to Chinese traditions. Languages changed. Cultures blended. Local administrations became increasingly independent. The empire slowly transformed into several distinct civilizations, sharing a common origin, but no longer a common future. Commerce remained active for generations. The famous Silk Road experienced one of its safest periods under Mongol rule. Ideas, technology, medicine, and knowledge traveled between East and West faster than ever before. Their legacy reached far beyond warfare. Paper currency spread. Gunpowder traveled westward. Diplomatic relations expanded. Entire continents became more connected than they had ever been. Yet, none of those achievements could restore political unity. By the 14th century, the fractures had become impossible to ignore. The Yuan dynasty lost control of China. The Ming dynasty replaced it. The Ilkhanate fragmented after internal succession crises. The Chagatai Khanate divided into competing factions. The Golden Horde weakened under continuous political struggles. One by one, the great branches of the empire evolved into independent states. There was never a single day when the Mongol Empire officially disappeared. No final battle, no dramatic surrender, no emperor watching everything collapse. Instead, the greatest contiguous empire in history slowly became something else. Its enormous size, once its greatest strength, had become its greatest challenge. The very distances that allowed endless expansion made lasting unity almost impossible. Ironically, the Mongols had conquered the world faster than they could build institutions capable of governing it. Their armies created an empire, but no army could preserve it forever. Still, their influence never truly vanished. Modern trade routes still follow paths they once protected. Diplomatic connections between East and West grew because of their expansion. Entire civilizations exchanged ideas that otherwise might never have met. Even today, their impact can still be found across Europe, the Middle East, Central Asia, and China. The Mongol Empire disappeared, but its legacy never did. History often remembers the battles, the victories, the terrifying cavalry charges, but those were only the beginning. The real lesson is far more fascinating. Empires rarely collapse at the moment they stop winning. They begin to disappear when governing becomes harder than conquering. Sometimes, the greatest empires are not destroyed by stronger enemies. They simply become too vast, too complex, and too divided to remain one. And that is how the Mongol Empire conquered the world, yet could never conquer time.